everybody, and welcome back. This is Cyber Warrior, and it is Security Happy Hour. So today I have Mike, and Mike, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. Gualtieri?
Gualtieri.
Gualtieri. Okay. Both of us, awesomely enough, are from Pittsburgh. Mike, I've actually been connected to on LinkedIn for quite some time. I don't know exactly how long, but we've talked a little bit in the past. And as a technologist, entrepreneur, real big into Linux and privacy, I had to get him on the show. So here he is today. And Mike, to start off, why don't you tell us kind of like where you came from, what you're doing, and kind of where you want to take things?
Oh boy, that's a big question. All right, where did I come from? Well, I got into security long time ago. Actually, in my bio that I use when I give talks and things like that, I have a line in there that I got into security at a young age when I discovered about like at this point maybe like 5 years ago that I had password protected a bunch of my 5 1/4 floppy disks from my Apple II system when I was a kid, and I of course did not remember the passwords. So I had to like hack my way into like my old files, like because the machine still works. I was going through some of those disks. I wanted to see what I put in there because I wrote a bunch of old basic programs back like when I was in like fifth grade, and I did. It was easy to hack. You just are able to like break the program, and then you can output the program to the screen, and then you can give the passwords in clear text. Password was Ninja. And I'm pretty sure it was because I was really into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at the time. So I guess that's kind of the origin of security. But I really got into things. I would say like in college, I got my computer science undergrad, and at that time, so this was the late '90s, and this was when Loft and the CDC were huge. These guys were absolute giants, and I used to hang out on like the Hacker News Network and on Security Focus and some of the mailing lists that a lot of these guys like Weld Pond would like, and and Mudge would like post to these forums, and I just really looked up to those guys. And at the time, security was a really new field. Like essentially a lot of the stuff we do today as penetration testers was just flat out illegal. So and it was guys like Loft that were pushing that forward with their vulnerability disclosure and finding flaws in Windows. And I remember when CDC announced back orifice at DEF CON. Well, I wasn't there. I remember when they did that, and it was like the biggest thing ever. So as the kind of like young novice hacker type, um, that's kind of what lit the spark under me. And looking at that generation of guys got me interested in it. And I've always just been interested in tinkering with technology. Like you said, we talked a little before you started recording. I'm a long time desktop Linux user. I started using Linux in college, fiddling around with things. And then I just kind of took it from there, and I'm still doing software and security stuff, software development, and offensive security work, and have my own company, and that's where I'm going.
Yeah, so I seen on your profile. So not only do you have your development company, but you're actually working at Pitt now too, if I'm not mistaken, and help develop that program and what they're doing for computer security or computer science or whatever. So how's that going? How'd you get into that? And did that come from you being with your own company? Did they approach you, or was that something you talked to them about?
So I went to Pitt for my graduate studies. That's how we ended up in Pittsburgh, because I'm actually from New Jersey, and I moved out here in the early 2000s. Went to Pitt, got my grad school, got my master's in CS, and also I ended up getting an MBA there as well because I wanted to start my own company. Uh, so what ended up happening was I was working on a talk that I gave at the Three Rivers Information Security Symposium here. I think it was 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think that was because I think that's the one I was at.
Yeah. Okay. So I gave a talk there. It was about stealing data with cascading style sheets on the web and how to conduct that type of an attack and how to defend against it. And it had been a while. I actually, so I currently have a multiple two consulting companies, software development company and security company, is just a spin out of into another entity what I was doing. And I had one consulting firm that I was doing both at, and we kind of took one business over.
Right.
But it was prior to any of the consulting work. I actually had another startup company called Kidix Computing. I did that for a while. That we made a children's operating system built on Linux, and I did that for a number of years. And during that time, I gave a lot of talks, mostly to investors who didn't give us money. But
it happens.
But I did a lot of talks. It had been a while, quite frankly, before I gave a talk. I really wanted to make sure I was polished and could deliver it well. So I approached my old advisor, Pitt, and said, hey, do you think any of the undergrads or grad students, whoever, would like to hear this talk? So he said, yeah, it would be great. Come on in. So I gave the talk at Pitt that I gave later at Three Rivers. And during that talk, we talked after, and he sent me an email, and he's like, oh, have you ever thought about being a professor? And I said, not until this second that you mentioned it, but it could be fun. I told him I'm not going to leave my job or anything to become a professor. That's not my goal. But it would be really interesting to teach security. So I said, hey, how about I pitch you a security class in offensive security? Hello.
Hey, Dustin. Hey, go ahead, finish up, Mike, and then we'll introduce Dustin here.
That sounds good. Anyways, long story short, what turned out happening was that Pitt was developing this new program called the Professional Institute, and it was specifically focused on post-baccalaureate students. So basically, students who had an undergrad who were in industry who were looking to transition into security. So we got talking, and they needed somebody to teach penetration testing. So that's basically how it all ended up coming together. So what I've done for them, that course ended up becoming two courses because, as you know, there's a lot of background material you have to know to be an offensive. So we do two courses. So I developed the curriculum for that. I developed cyber ranges for both. But the offensive boot camps, the first one focuses more on vulnerability discovery and system exploitation, and then the second course is penetration testing. So more on the network level.
Right. All right. Well, we'll get back to that. Dustin, you're here. You made it. So why don't you tell us? So you were a captain in the military, correct?
Yeah, in the Army.
In the Army, yeah.
Yeah. I actually did 27 years total in the Army Reserve. My first 18 was enlisted, and then the last 8 or 9 was as an officer, and then I got medically retired out. So I had a couple of years to go before I was ready to retire.
Yeah. So what'd you do in the Army? So that's 27 years of your life. What'd you do?
Yeah. So it was mostly military intelligence. I was the signals intelligence analyst for the biggest part of my career. And then as an officer, I was a signal intelligence officer as well as an all-source officer. And I deployed twice to Iraq, both enlisted, and then I deployed to Kuwait most recently as the cyber threat intel officer.
Okay.
So, pretty good stuff. And then I have a background in cyber from my primary work because I work for the city of Thousand Oaks in California. So I have built their cyber program. So out there, I'm the sock and the knock. So I'm a little busy.
Nice. Yeah, so you're doing a little bit of everything there. I know that pain. I do. I know that pain.
All of us do.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we were just talking, myself and Mike. He's doing a lot with Pitt and his companies as far as penetration testing and secure coding and software development and things like that. And then, we've got you working SOC, NOC, and all that. And the big thing, so I want to get in this because with military, between me and you, Dustin, and then Mike, who's working in the colleges, one of the things that's crossed my mind these days is education, right? So Elon Musk said degrees shouldn't matter. I've said degrees shouldn't matter for the longest time when it comes to applying for a job. But that's based on my experience, where I graduated college in '09, and that was with my bachelor's. So even then, cybersecurity wasn't really taught in schools. You know, so, and we all know how long it takes curriculums to get changed. I mean, in the military, it could take, I think, 3 years before a curriculum change. So you're already 3 years behind, especially in terms of cybersecurity. How hard is it in colleges? Like, does that cybersecurity, like, Mike, how is it easy for you to keep up with the pace of changes of exploits or different vulnerabilities or technologies, or is it a lot more paperwork to kind of revamp the curriculum to meet the demand of today?
So in the military, it's definitely more paperwork to change a curriculum, right? Because it's institutionalized, and it has been this way for so long. They're getting more flexible in it. But the biggest benefit that the military actually has on the cybersecurity side are the reservists, right? Because there's a lot of us that already work in that field, so we bring that knowledge with us, and that's where they benefit a lot. And as we see the training change, we can still help guide, try to put people on the right path. The downside to at least the Army is, they're very focused on what they learn. It's specific to the equipment that the Army has. So mostly it's Cisco stuff. So if they go somewhere that doesn't have Cisco, the skills don't quite work out well. They're trained to do a certain task a certain way. And once, like for active duty folks that come out, it's kind of hard to break that sometimes.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, my courses are new. Like, I think I taught the first round of the first offensive boot camp last summer, so a little more than a year. I'll be teaching the first round of the second course. It's going to start in 3 weeks from today. So, so it's a new course. So I haven't had to worry too much about, okay, this thing has changed so much and it's not relevant anymore. But beyond that, I don't want to have to go in and revamp the whole course every time I teach this, because I would never be able to get out from my workload. Yeah. I think it really comes down to fundamentals, right? So you could look at an old flaw that's 10 years old, but is a classic flaw. And actually, one that comes to mind, and I know you have...
I'm going to say it.
Is like that MS...
08067.
A bunch of times in there, right? But, it's an ancient vulnerability, but it's a real classic. Like, if you look at the exploit, there it is. Here's the shell code. It works really well. You modify the shell code. So if you want to teach something, so I actually don't use that specific exploit in my course, but I think it's a great fundamental, right? So here's how you modify an exploit and change the shell code and generate it with MSF Venom. So yeah, if MSF Venom goes away, we're going to have to tweak that, right? And change out MSF Venom, right, the new thing. But the fundamental doesn't change. And like it crosses to things like cross-site scripting and CSRF and SQL injection. Yeah, these things are becoming less common, but also they still exist. The fundamental of how XSS works is not going to change. So you can teach a basic example and then hopefully introduce some more realistic exploits into the process.
Definitely, and I think, I agree with that, and I think as long as, and it was weird, so I used to drive Uber, and I would drive all the college kids in Pittsburgh, and it was always entertaining, but the best was when I would pick up kids from CMU, because CMU is like considered one of the elite schools for computers and robotics and everything else like that, especially computer science. And when I went to and when I went to Pitt, they taught Java, and I'm sure they would have gotten other languages, but I ended up leaving there and get my degree from somewhere else. But I asked the guy, I said, so what languages are you learning? And the guy looked at me and he goes, I'm not learning a language. So what do you mean? And he said, we're learning the ability to write in any language. And I was like, for computer science, it's odd to me. You would think a school like that, they would kind of gear it towards C++ or C# or whatever, pick a coding language, and that's what they're going to kind of delve the curriculum into, even if it's electives. But no, the way they do things is so that they give you the fundamental capabilities to do the job and write any language. And I think I have had a bad, at least me myself, I've had a bad idea of how colleges and the military do some of their trainings because of how quickly things change. But the more I've done training, and even going through OSCP, I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike, with it comes down to fundamentals and concepts, right? Because even to this day, I preach to people, know your concepts. If you don't know your concepts, whether it be enumeration or exploitation or post-exploitation, if you don't understand the fundamentals of how to do those things, then no tool in the world is going to save you. You have to know how to look at this stuff. So I think that's probably one of the better ways I've heard it explained for a degree program, is that it's more we teach you tools, but it's really to understand the fundamentals and the concepts of how to do the job. And I think a lot of these certifications, people hate CEH, but CEH teaches concepts for less money than OSCP. I mean, let's be honest, it's a lot less expensive, and their whole premise is concepts and things like that. And people are gonna hate me. I'm probably gonna get comments, actually, maybe, but comments about CEH. And oh my God, it's a garbage cert and this, that, the other. Right. But at the end of the day, it's they do that. It's all concepts. It's understanding it. So from the perspective of education, is that something we need to get back to? Is the fundamentals of truly how to do the job, and not, oh, you need to answer these questions or be able to do this exploit without understanding what the exploit does.
Yeah, and I think that's what Michael's saying too. Is, right now he's teaching some of the tools, but it's really about the fundamentals, right? If you don't even know what that means, like what the tool is trying to get to, then it's never gonna help you.
Yeah, it has to always be about fundamentals. I still use basic knowledge I gained in my computer science curriculum now. Not everybody in security has a CS background. Actually, I would gather probably most people don't have a CS background. They maybe came in through IT operations or a dozen other avenues. That's fine. And my thing about education and security is that it certainly is going to be helpful to be more educated. You getting a CEH is fine. And is it the best cert in the world? Like, I personally haven't went through it, so I don't really have a judgment call on it. A lot of people poo-poo it. I've seen some silly questions that are on the exam.
Yeah.
At the same time, you can never, ever fault somebody for getting that because they educated themselves, right?
Right.
So I think the more knowledge you put in your head, the better. And if that's going to be a stepping stone that you want to do, or if that's all you can afford at the time because it's cheaper than OSCP and certainly a lot cheaper than the SANS course, do it. Just put knowledge in your head.
Yeah.
In a course, it's going to come in quicker than it is going to come in through blogs. You can assemble everything. It's all out there on the internet. But until you know what to search for and how to read it properly, it's going to come a lot quicker by doing a CEH or OSCP or getting a CS degree.
And I think you're right. Like, so Keytron Evans, who has been one of my mentors for, God, years now. I don't even remember when I got my CEH. But I was at the Pentagon, and I went through the InfoSec Institute boot camp for CEH, and Keytron Evans was my instructor, and one of the things he taught us was how to do the job. So it wasn't the cert. It wasn't to teach you to pass the certification. It was how to do the job. And by paying attention, and mind you, by this point, I'd already been playing with, like, Backtrack since, I don't know, 2004, I think it was. So it had been years that I've been playing with Linux and attacking tools. But getting his perspective, because he's in the field and doing the job, it kind of changed my way of thinking, because mine was always, I was a script kiddie. For me, it was, give me a tool. I can use any tool. And if I couldn't use a tool to do it, then I was out of luck. Like, there was just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I didn't know how to fix Linux. I didn't know how to fix a tool. I didn't know how to read Python. Like, none of that stuff. But getting his perspective on things definitely changed my mindset a little bit. And even recently, We've had some more discussions about certifications and education and jobs and things like that as far as what they ask for. So I think you're right. Education is never a bad thing. And the one thing I tell people is always learn. You should be learning something new every day. Like, if you're not learning something new, then what are you doing with your life? Because there's, like...
One of the things I just want to interject real quick is that education is also a good balance for inexperience, right? If you're looking to just get in this field and you don't have 10 years of experience looking at network traffic and all the, you can't modify exploits, get some education behind you to learn, because you're going to accelerate that, right? You're always as good as the last thing you do. And if the last thing you did was getting masters in CS or doing OSCP, then people are going to look at that experience and say, oh, well, that's where they're going to start your reference at and then move back from there. So I think it's a great way to jumpstart.
Yeah,
But I would rather have a guy with OSCP and maybe only 2 to 5 years experience than have a guy that only has CEH and has 10 years of experience. Because that guy is not going to be in the same place.
But what if he couldn't afford the OSCP? And I think that's one of the things that us as security professionals, we put so much weight on certification that we discount some of the experience that I mean, I knew a guy at my last job that had so much tribal knowledge of the job he was doing and so much experience doing it. I don't think he had a ton of certifications, but at the end of the day, like, he was someone I relied on. Like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, how do I fix this? What's going on? And it was when I was working as a blue teamer, and I was like, I'm lost. So I think we need to.
You need both, is what it comes out to.
Well, you do.
Experience, and you gotta have some education.
The education's a big part, but I think we need to find a way. And what I tell people is, put yourself out there, right? Write a blog, do a YouTube channel, do GitHub, whatever will prove you know what you know. So even if you don't have a degree, and I think that's where some of these HR systems fail, but even if you don't have a degree or the certifications, you have something that a director or a hiring manager can look at and go, oh, he really knows what he's doing. He wrote about all this. He has a YouTube channel that explains all that. So I think education-wise, and again, I think it's amazing. I think a lot of people, if you can afford it, if you can go to school, or if you can get the certifications and do it, there's no reason not to. But I think sometimes we put too much value on it, especially because there are people out there that devalue the cert. And I did a video on that 2 days ago on pirated training and things of that nature. So they devalue what people have done because they're not going through the training. They're just getting material and like, oh yeah, I can do it now. Like,
That was a big problem with OSCP, right? And why you must have had the
I got the new one.
you had the new one, but you also probably had to be filmed while you were
Yep.
while you're taking it, right? I was the last group, so I got my OSCP in 2018, and I did it for education, right? I've been in the field,
Yeah.
on the board, and polish off some of my skills, and boy, it was a great experience. I would recommend anybody do OSCP if you're interested in offensive. It is a tremendous experience. But where was I going with that? I got off topic.
But they were sharing it. They were recording their screens and sending out the videos of the exam.
Yeah, it wasn't so much U.S. students. I heard through the grapevine. I don't know how much it was true or not, but there was other countries. There was basically mills, and you needed. The problem is because people are looking for the cert. So what happens? People get the cert, and the cert then becomes meaningless. OSCP, offensive security, had to step in to do something about it. I think they made the right call there because if we value that cert, then me and you saying, "Oh man, OSCP was such a great experience," people would say, "Whatever, man, everybody's got that."
Yeah, and you're right, and it's one of those things where you're right. It is other countries, and I've turned in one guy in particular twice now on Facebook, to SANS and to offensive security for releasing their material, because for me, it devalues what I've done. Like, I don't want things in the military. I'm sorry, the military has ruined CompTIA, because the military has gone through, put 8570, well, they renumbered it now, but they put the regulation in place to say you need these certs, then paid for boot camps that just taught the cert. They didn't teach concepts. They didn't teach the material like in a way that people could actually take it back and utilize it. These companies just teach you to pass a certification. I'm not going to name names of the companies, but like, I value InfoSec because the instructors taught how to do the job. It wasn't to pass the certification, but because of the way they taught, you got the certification, but took added knowledge above and beyond. And there's other companies that the military hires to do these trainings that legitimately teach you to pass the test. And Security Plus is a big one. Security Plus, which is all about the concepts of security and understanding firewalls, IDSs, IPSs, the list goes on. You got people that pass it, they come back, and you're like, all right, what's port 443? I don't know. What did you do?
DEF CON last year, and there was that quiz show thing they had, and people didn't know what port 23 Telnet was. I was like a lot of people cringe. It's like, yeah, nobody uses Telnet anymore. I get it, but it's really like, you should know that.
And yeah, and that's why I hate when I did not like the military putting that regulation in place and then pushing it to where we're going to hire these boot camp instructors to teach the test. And yes, it was a specific company that they still probably hire to this day and contract to this day. So with the 25 Deltas and the Network Defenders, and when they brought in SANS, it was amazing because SANS has their standard. Now they had like 2 instructors that helped kind of develop the course, but it was still different instructors all the time teaching the SANS way, and they had to be doing the job. They had to be certified SANS instructors. So SANS keeps that level, and that's why in the military to this day, SANS is by far the best certification that I've ever earned out of all of them, and I've got a few, but SANS is probably my most prized possessions as far as certifications go, even with OSCP and CISP. And that's just because of what you learn from the instructors that teach the course. And it's not the certification itself. But
yeah, I always found that CISP is one of the weirdest ones because everyone treats it as a technical cert.
It's management.
But it's not. It's totally not. You're trying to get a little bit of a wide range of subjects, so you have some knowledge of where things fit. But outside of that, it's not going to teach you how to do anything. It's good to have.
I've said before, like, CISP is kind of like the MBA of security certification. And I have an MBA, so it's nothing about the slight against MBAs, but it's very business focused. It's the business of security and how that fits. Very useful information. I was thinking about it. I don't have that. The only cert I have is OSCP. I did that because I wanted to do it for fun. And fun and grueling, but I can't afford SANS. I have my own consulting firm, so I can't afford SANS. But I mean, you can't knock the quality that they're very expensive.
Oh yeah.
People in the world, so that's what you're paying for. But CISP, yeah, I was thinking about doing it, but the material is interesting, but it's a lot to get through.
It is. So I went through once again another InfoSec boot camp for that one. And it was because I've been in the field for so long, studying it on my own, and then doing 25 Delta in the military, plus SANS courses and everything else, that I was like, all right, I'll go through a boot camp, and where some people take months to study for this thing. I literally went through the boot camp, took the test. I was scared. I was really scared that I was going to fail because I got like up to like 100 questions, and it's the newer test where if you get a passing score before 100 points, they automatically pass you. And I was like, oh, might fail. So
They came in, they did a boot camp, and you had the option of taking a test right then or waiting whatever time you needed. I'm like, no, you got to test me now, otherwise it's gonna
yeah, but it was an interesting test, and it's what's best for a business.
Yeah.
So you still got to you got to combine business and security. So you need to be secure, but you also got to weigh the risks and weigh, all right, cost of doing business versus the risk, and then people always come first. Well, they say people always come first, but anybody who's worked for a major enterprise knows that can be debatable. But it's one of those things. It is very much a management certification. Now, I can understand how mid-level and senior level jobs can ask for that as a preferential cert, because you're going to be interacting with directors or even your boss or clients at like a CISO level, so you need to be able to speak those terms. But I have seen junior level jobs ask for a CISP or a GX certification, and I'm like, question.
You're just checking boxes.
And that's the thing.
Yesterday, somebody I didn't follow the person, so I don't know who tweeted, but it was some job post that the candidate had to be of an SOC 2, like a SOC 2 certification. Like,
The candidate needed to be SOC 2 certified?
The candidate had to be SOC 2. So I mean, clearly this is just nonsense. It's box checking because HR doesn't understand the requirements, and they say, we need these X, Y, and Z things. Oh, CIS, yeah, we need a CIS, but you have to have 3 years of experience, right? But you need 5 to even get the CIS. Well, let's get 2 years CIS. So there's a big disconnect.
There is.
You have those certs doesn't actually mean you can do the job.
No, and that's the big thing for me is I value my certs, but I value my experience more. And I value what I bring to the table. And I won't ever say I'm an expert in anything, because I learn, like, even now, I've got people that I learn from. My boss now is amazing. And, like, every day, we'll do OSINT, and what takes me probably 8 hours to do, he'll do in 30 minutes. And I'm like, how do you do all this? Like, how do you correlate all this data to be able to do these things? And it just comes natural to him. Like, he just builds his story, like, all right, I found this, and this, and this is how it leads. I'm like, it would have taken me a day to put all that information together. But it's tribal knowledge. It's doing it over and over and over again, and you just learn these things. And a certification, it's kind of one of those things. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. So you can get them the cert, but you can't make them actually utilize and be able to do all that they're trained to do. And so yeah, man, like, certifications and education for me have always been weird, because I value my experience more. And even though a lot of people take pride in their certifications, and I do, I mean, I ain't gonna lie, I use it to remember where I came from and how the path I've taken. But I think the experience and the people that I deal with, Mike, like I said, I've been following you between LinkedIn and Twitter. I mean, we've been connected for a while, and Dustin, I met you recently, but even still, the conversations I see people have, especially in security, is what entices me to keep doing more and more, and what keeps me driven. And so, education is huge, but I think we need to start looking more at experience and what people bring outside of a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, you kind of need both, but you can't have one without the other. That's how it should be, right? It's great that you have the cert, but if you haven't done anything with it, then I don't care, right? But the opposite is true too. Hey, you got a ton of experience, but you never took any tests. So it's not that I need to see it, but if you're going to step from here to somewhere else, you're going to have it. It's more of a stepping stone. I have a buddy of mine from work. He joined the Air Force, the Air National Guard, and he got into their cyber program. So he's coming back with his security plus. I'm like, great, that's a good starting point. He can come in and work with me. We both work at Thousand Oaks, and then I can kind of bring him up to speed on some stuff, and then he can go try some other tests if he wants to. But that's only if he's looking to leave Thousand Oaks, because where I work, they don't require any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can do an awesome job and not have any type of cert or anything. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, Dustin, when you're saying if you want to leave that position and go somewhere else. And it's really, in most organizations, so you get a job one of 2 ways. try to work those friendships and those angles to maybe find a job opening and then, you know, you end up landing a job. I would argue that the latter is better. It's always better to get a job through networking, but I think most people do end up getting a job a traditional way.
Starting out, for sure.
You don't end up getting, you don't get through the resume filter.
And so, like, and here's my problem. And I had a conversation when I got out of the Army. I don't know if it was I can't remember if it was a headhunter or a recruiter for a company, but they called me after I submitted my resume, and I said, I'm looking at your job description. I said, I got a question for you. I said, which GAC cert you want? Because literally on their certifications it said GAC and I think CISP. I don't remember if that was on there or not, but definitely GAC. I said, which GAC cert you want? He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, GAC's a certification authority. He's like, how so? I said, because SANS teaches the courses. GAC is the authority for the certification. So I have, and at the time I had 4. I was like, I have GSEC, GCED, GPYC, and GCIH. GAC, Security Essentials. GAC, Certified Incident Handler. And he was like, oh. I'm like, yeah, so which one you want? He goes, it just says GAC. I'm like, and there's your problem. So you can't find the right person for the job if you don't know what you're looking for.
They're also excluding too, because if they are looking for that keyword and you put your specific certs on there, but don't put the GAC on there, they're like, oh well, this guy's not qualified, right? We don't need.
Yep. And so leading from that, right? So we've talked about the education and the certifications, and getting into this job market. That leads into the shortage, right? The skill shortage. I find that nigh on impossible. Well, not impossible, but I don't think it's as bad as they make it out to be. I think it's more, we're looking for this because we don't know what we want or what we need.
Or it's, we're looking for this, but we want to pay you this.
Well, yeah, that's the other one too. That's a huge one. So,
It's like I think it's trendy also. You know, there's a lot of jobs that need to be filled. They're told that they need security people, so they transition IT into security, even if they want to be or not. And I don't know, you know, I think there is a skill shortage. I think that companies desperately need talented security people. I don't know if they know how to fill those roles all the time.
and I think that's the big thing right there, is not knowing how. So we have CISOs. Now, not all companies have them, but all companies should have at least a CIO or a CTO, which should have some knowledge of security, to where they should know at least the certifications in the IT and security spectrum, right? So why is it that we have job descriptions going out asking for things? Is that the hiring manager and the execs not knowing what to ask, or is that HR checking this and HR putting out the job description? Like, where is that cutoff? Where's the blame lie with some of this stuff?
Yeah, I've seen it both ways, because like where I'm at, we only have an IT manager. He has no clue what cybersecurity is, and that's why I've been building the program. He is in the field, he knows the buzzword, that's it. And then I interviewed for a job at a local hospital, and they actually had a good idea of what they were looking for. The hiring manager was really good, knew kind of what the certs meant and how they're applied. So I kind of seen it in like both ways. But it needs to be somewhere in the middle, right? You need to understand what you're asking for and what kind of experience should come along with that. And then, you can't be asking for the Cadillac or you don't want to pay for the Pinto and expect to get someone that's really good.
So do they hire a director or a legit CISO that's not somebody's best friend? Because let's be honest, when you go by who you know, sometimes you get someone with a degree in basket weaving and experience in sewing and put them in a CISO role because they're somebody's friend. We all know what happens. I mean, that's how some of your boards are designed. But do you bring someone in at that top tier that has management and security experience to then hire out the staff, so that this security person should know what to look for in his job roles.
I think that
Yeah, that would be ideal, but we're not set up that way. If you were starting from scratch, that's great, but normally we're not.
I think from top to bottom, there needs to be technical expertise for security. That's my opinion, but I'm kind of a technical security guy, so you can make the case otherwise. I think the reason why you see a lot of business-focused people in the CISO role is because it's a business job. They interface with the boardroom. They either report directly to the board, to the CEO, or to the COO. I've seen. I think the higher up that reporting goes, I would argue that CISO should report directly to the board. That way, there's a level of they just have more stake in the decisions that are being made. But regardless, I would argue also that every CISO should have some type of technical background in security. Do they need to be an exploit writer or anything like that? No, of course not. Do they need to understand networks and the basics of how communication works? Yeah. And you do see some roles that are completely business. And well, then you see them in the news because they're getting ransomware.
Right.
Totally top down. There are business oriented security roles that need to be filled.
For sure.
We solve technical problems. And I've thought about tweeting this out a few times. You know how people do those unpopular opinions? I have an unpopular opinion. I have an unpopular opinion that security is technical problems and deserve technical solutions, right? People like to say security is people problems, right? And people are a catalyst in like a person opens a phishing email. But there was a technical deficiency that allowed that phishing email to have lateral movement throughout the network, right? So we solve technical problems, and we have to understand those to fix them.
So I've seen.
No, agreed. Yeah.
I definitely agree. One of the biggest things I've seen though that go along that line though, is even though we may have some people that are technical, you'll have that CEO, that CIO, that CTO, and even sometimes the CISO go to a conference, whether it be RSA or Black Hat or DEF CON or whatever the case may be, and they'll see the blinky lights. And they'll have someone pitch them some spiel of FUD. So then this gets put in play, but then they don't have the personnel to actually utilize it. So if we're going to build top down, how do we get away from that? How do we get away from the person that wants to improve the business, right? So let's say we hire a CISO. So we've never had one. We're finally going to bring in someone as a CISO that reports to the board and sits on the on the board and everything. But how do we bring someone in that, and I talked about this in another video, that doesn't always say no? Because if you take someone that's truly technical, let's be honest, that is truly a technical security person, just about every time an option's brought to them, they're going to say no. It's insecure. It happens. I've seen it happen. Yeah. I've seen it where they're like, no, we can't do that. No. So how do we bring that person in that's going to be business-minded and understand the needs of the business and the needs of security and mesh them together and mitigate those problems?
You can't achieve perfect security, and that's the thing.
No.
And you absolutely have to put users and the business in the first place there. Everything we're sitting on, all the technology we're using right now has 0-day flaws that we're unaware of, right? You can't achieve perfect security. So try to always say no, right? It seems like that. I agree. It seems like our job is to say no a lot of the time. But if that's the only thing you're going to do, you aren't providing value. You have to enhance the business in an imperfect world. You have to reduce the risk the best you can with the budget you can and solve the problems you can do. If there's a gross negligence, it's your job to point that out. And then it's the management's job.
Right.
Let's say it goes all the way up to the CISO, and the CISO tells the board or the CEO, and they say, no, we aren't going to do that. Then they're liable for that negligence, right? But otherwise, you do the best you can with the resources that you have in front of you.
So, and Dustin,
Right.
you're sock knock right now. And again, I said it before. We need more of an IT and security collaboration.
Right.
Because, and it goes back to what you were saying, Mike, where we talk about business enablement and not always saying no. I think part of that comes from that cutoff, that we're separate entities. So IT is going to do something, but security says no. But guess what? I'm IT and have admin rights. I'm going to do it anyways. How do we come to the table, and how do we bring those together? Because you'll see that in a lot of companies where security is like, well, I need to be separate from IT. Well, yeah, technically, because you need to be able to see the security of the entire business and what's going on. But at the same time, to enable the business, you need to be with IT to work these mitigation factors. So, Dustin, how does that work within what you're doing to have business enablement and work with IT and security and kind of bring them together to sit down and do it all?
Yeah, well, and that's where I'm at. That's me. That's how I work, right? So I do all of the networking, switching, wireless, all of that, and I do all of the cybersecurity. So I have to play both roles because I can't make one break the other, and vice versa. But I think when you have that true separation in larger companies, you need to at least put them in the same room so they can talk to each other and not be walled off. It's got to be open. When I was in Kuwait, I worked at the regional cyber center in Kuwait, and that's something I noticed that happened there. It's like everybody had like a cubicle row, and so your network guys were here, your kind of business developers were over here, and I'm the cyber threat intel guy. I went to the networking section and asked if I could just get a list of kind of the IP ranges that were in use by us. No, it took me a week, and the guy brought me over like a route print from a router, and I'm like, it's not gonna do it. Like, that's not gonna help me, because I was trying to figure out a way to get rid of our ranges, so I wasn't looking through them for the enemy.
That's military.
That
I know that.
Simple, and
I know that pain, and that was even being in IT. I know that pain.
Yeah, I mean, I think the military is the severe end of the spectrum where it's all about separation of duties and not talking to anyone. Where I'm the opposite. I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I'm it. Like, I do both of those jobs, so it's easy for me to make a decision on what I think I need to do. But everyone else is kind of in the middle, right? And if you're a smaller shop, it's easy to put those teams together. If you're a bigger shop, it's not as easy, but if they had designed it that way from the beginning, it would have been easy.
I think one of or actually two trends right now that I think are very positive in the industry. And the first being, when you're writing a penetration testing report or even a vulnerability assessment, identifying how to fix these flaws in the report, right? So it does nobody any good that I dropped all these hot exploits on you and I moved laterally and owned your whole organization. That is just garbage, right? If you can't tell somebody how to fix any of this, it's totally worthless. And if you can't balance that against a business reality, it's totally worthless too. You have to understand that organizations can't do everything. So what do you recommend? What are the settings that you should be in place, and how are you going to prioritize those? So that's one thing that's going on, I think, in penetration testing right now, having this focus on the defensive strategy that's very positive. The second positive thing that I think is really awesome is the whole purple teaming concept. And I've always just loathed this whole red team versus blue team, and everybody hates each other, and blue teamers hate offensive tooling being out in public, and red teamers loathe blue teamers. Yeah, all right. At the end of the day, kind of like adversaries at times, right? Where we're trying to evade defenses, they're trying to find us. Okay, I get it. But you need to sit down in a room. And I really like this concept of purple teaming, where maybe at the end of a red team engagement, here is what we did. We're going to write a script and we're going to replay the script over and over again. And we're going to sit in a room for a day or a week or however long it's going to be. And we're going to work on these detections and we're going to replay them and replay them. So next time we step in, you're going to catch us right the first second that we're going to try these same attacks.
So talking about that, so we know there's 3 different types of actual pen tests. So not a vulnerability assessment. 3 actual different types of pen tests. So you've got your black box, your gray box, and your white box. Which one is most beneficial when it comes to finding out whether or not your security team is where it should be? And we're not talking purple team, because we both know sometimes purple team doesn't come into play. So when you're trying to evaluate your security construct, is it best for a white box where you have all the details and creds and everything, or is it best for, a gray or black box where you're trying to get in and they should be alerting on things that they see?
So I
think it's both.
Oh, I actually do a lecture just on this topic, talking about the different types of penetration testing. And so I think it depends on what type of testing you're doing, right? But basically, black box is the cheapest and the least surface, right? It's quick to do. So if you need a quick test of your perimeter, you can do black box. I think gray box, and if you want to, what I like to adapt, the gray box and just call it assume breach. So if you're doing an assume breach, so I highly recommend anybody watching this video to go look up Red Seas Security, look up Tim Medin. He's a giant in the industry, awesome guy too. And he has, Red Seas just put out 2 webcasts recently, one that Tim does, one of his employees do, about assume breach penetration testing. This, if you're doing a network penetration test, assume breach is the absolute best model. And basically what it is, if for people who aren't aware, is that not only do you look at the externals and all that, but you start out with network access. You say, what's going to happen after the phish, right? You can do phishing training a million times, but from my own clients, every time they do a phishing, I don't do phishing training, but they hire like Go Fish or Know Before, and they, when they run these simulations, there's always one person that clicks on it, right?
At least.
So that's not the problem. What the problem is, once somebody clicks on that phish and they move laterally throughout their network, that's what we're looking for. So assume breach just cuts down some of that cost. So I don't need to spend 2 weeks trying to phish my way in an organization. I can detonate some malware on a PC, and you can even do like a white card approach where you could have a trusted advisor inside the organization that will detonate the malware. You can email it. So you even have those IOCs that go through the email filters and everything. They'll double click on that payload. It will execute, and then you're in. And guess what? If you have problems detonating that, they execute it anyway. So you can get the test underway, and it costs the company a lot less. Now, just the last thing, you mentioned white box testing. And I think white box is exclusively good for application security testing. And when you're testing a web application or app, you have to look at that source code while you're doing it. It is an absolute waste of my time to do black box testing on a web app, especially like, I mean, if it's a live environment, like a production environment, but give me the code. Like if your database is, if you're storing databases inside like a directory there, and I didn't guess the right directory, it doesn't mean that an attacker is not going to do that. I'm going to look at, I can say, get that out of the web root, and it's going to take me 10 seconds to identify that risk, whereas maybe I'll see it, maybe I won't. And so that's kind of my spiel on where each one fit. I don't like black box testing at all, to be honest. I like gray box / assume breach, and I like white box.
I like black box to an extent, but because of a lot of companies' capabilities with what they've done on the external net, and especially now with cloud, it's become more of a vulnerability assessment of port scan, and do you actually have a vulnerable service? I do feel that assume breach, so gray box and or even a VPN into the client, and just, you know, moving laterally or doing whatever you can do from that VPN endpoint is a hell of a lot better. Just because you're going to get more out of it. Because and you mentioned Go Fish, you mentioned Know Before and all these phishing trainings. I despise computer-based training. I absolutely despise it, because everybody just clicks and then answers questions and goes about their way. I much prefer in-person training, and I honestly think it's one of those things where companies would rather their employees just check the box and say, yeah, I did it, as opposed to actually getting trained. Especially now with cyber insurance, they're like, oh, we got insurance for it, so who cares?
The biggest enabler to ransomware is cybersecurity insurance.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a huge enabler.
Industry ransomware.
You know, because even to this day, people want to talk about spam filters and this, that, the other. Gmail, which is supposed to be one of the best at like eliminating spam and catching phishing and all that other stuff, to this day I get nonsense in my inbox that says, oh, I'm from such and such bank and you're approved for this. No. When your whole email is a link, no. So, I mean, but people buy into it, and you're still going to see it within corporations. I don't care what filter you put in place, what Barracuda or what name X company out there that's supposed to prevent this stuff, it's going to get through. Something is going to get through, and it's going to happen. But
yeah, we use a combination of both, right? We have a good email filter. We use Fortinet products quite a bit. We moved from Barracuda to a new.
I hate Fortinet.
Product.
I'm gonna let you know that now. I hate Fortinet and FortiGate. Okay,
yeah, let me finish it in.
Because they actually do a really good job when configured properly, and there's absolutely no way into a network when they're actually used right.
And that's why I've been using them probably since 2006 when they were nobody. But I think we do a combination of we do have the Know Before training that the employees do. We craft the fish tests ourselves, so we always know when they're going on. Not the whole department knows, though, because oftentimes I see something and I'm like, man, this looks like a phishing attempt, and I'll go start investigating and then find out it's our own campaign.
We used to do that at my last company. We'd get these phishing emails at least once a month, and we'd all look at it and go, put it right up in chat right away. Hey, this looks like phishing. Anybody know anything about it?
Yeah. So it's a combination that we do in-person training as well, and we keep track of the clickers. So each time they get caught clicking on something, they have to take longer and longer training. The videos just get longer, so it's better for them to actually pay attention. And then on the testing side, I think it's good for black box just to test my perimeter, right? That's really what I want. I want to know, can you get in? And then once we move to the actual networks inside, the assumed breach is really the only way to go, because why would you be testing on my network if I didn't think you were already in?
Right. Now, from a black box perspective, though, when it comes to web apps, so if somebody's not hosting a web application on site, right? So they're going through GoDaddy or whatever hosting platform they want to go through, AWS, whatever, and they don't have any link back to their network, all right? So there's really no database hosted. Is that web app considered black box at that point, or is it just the IP scope that they gave you?
No, I would still think that would be more assumed breach, because you really want to test the app, and if there's really no link, like I would want to know that. Is there a possibility of a link, or is there no link, right? Because it's just different. We actually do host quite a bit of our content in-house, so it's even more so where I need to know,
that's a bigger issue when you're hosting it in-house. If somebody can get by any of those things. And that's why I look at with all this cloud infra now, like where's the cutoff between black box and gray box / white box in the fall, where especially with the remote workforce. And that's another topic that I want to touch on before. I mean, we're over an hour, but that's okay. We're going to go a little bit long because there's one more topic I want to touch on. You look at black box, gray box, and white box, and you have everybody in the cloud now, or not everybody, but you got a lot of people moving to the cloud, and there's really very limited infrastructure. But maybe they host their databases or certain things still on, in a data center. Where does that pen test lie, right? If you get into the cloud but there's nothing there, is it a viable pen test? Other than maybe hacktivists taking down a site at that point? Or
I would try to increase the scope. I try to get clients to say everything's in scope, right? And that's not always possible, but try to broaden that scope. But what is always in scope is OS int. So they might say, I've actually done black box pen tests where here is one IP address. We want you to test this one IP address. Great. Okay. But the whole internet is my oyster then for OSINT, because the definition of OSINT is that we aren't doing anything illegal. We're looking at data out there. Maybe they have a WordPress site that's leaking usernames. Maybe they have breached passwords out there. Well, I'm going to pull in all that data that I can and throw it at that black box. And by the way, I'm also going to put in my report so they can see the value. That I didn't just run an Nmap scan and find out that, oh, well, sorry, there wasn't any flaws,
And we do the same thing at the company I work for is now, and again, it's because of my boss. I'm not going to lie. My boss and I told you, Mike, earlier, this guy is just a whiz at what he does. So beyond just some of the stuff we do, like I've started and working with my new counterpart, we've started enabling that where we're going to do this OSINT and we're going to look at what's there and see if that's going to get us anywhere. But with that, because of the type of testing we're doing, I'm not going to go about utilizing that information. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you where it can be utilized. But I'm not going to, because it may give me access to your internal network, I'm not going to abuse that information. I'm just going to inform you, this is what we found. This is what we found where it can be used. And here's your report.
You got to stay.
See, for me, I think it's just because of my background. I want you to collect OSINT, and then I want you to try and use it and tell me how far you got. But that's, again, part of my background, right? Because that's what I've done in the military as well. So, I want to know how far in you get.
But the problem with that is, though, and what you got to look at with some of these clients, doing things like what Mike does, where he works with clients, I work with clients. You look at lockout policies and the actual capabilities of the business. You start throwing things at it. You can lock out accounts, damage the business, and now you're on the hook for, I did this.
That's why you have to have a get out of jail free card that they sign, that they have backed everything up. You had to have that up front. That I put in a scoping document that said, hey, as a responsible penetration tester, we are going to take X, Y, and Z precautions, but you having us come in need to understand that there's certain risks of having a penetration tester in your environment. Now, that said, though, outside of the perimeter, exploits, I don't really use exploits too often. It's more like misconfigurations when you get into the network, and there's so much there.
Yeah, for sure. It's misconfigurations. I gotta build a few try hack me boxes for a friend of mine. I'm gonna do it for actually Ty Wilson for Cover 6 Solutions. I'm gonna build a few for his course, Linux based. But yeah, it's ridiculous, man. Like the things that are out there and the things that you can do, it's nuts. Now I did say I had another topic, and now I forgot what that topic was because we were just talking and shit. All right. I'm still going to keep going because I like this conversation, so we'll give it another 5-10 minutes.
Well, I got something to follow up that we were talking about, like, because it was actually something I'm at least going to write a blog post about it. I was thinking about putting in a talk, and I missed the talk deadline, and maybe I'll do a talk on it. But about phishing and assume breach. And one of the things, like, I don't like phishing. I don't like sending phishing email. Like,
I love it.
Shit. Well, I mean, I guess it's fun if somebody clicks on it, right? But the thing is, I think it's inefficient for the client, and anything inefficient for the client costs them money. And I work with a lot of small to mid-sized business, which is not like a lot of pen testers work at like these banks, and they got like 500 sites, and like my clients, the money comes directly from the owners, right? So every dollar spent is something they're concerned about. So, and that's why assume breach is so important, I think, at least in my scenario, in a lot of scenarios. But one of the things that I've adapted to my pen tests in like the last year or so is running like synthetic phishing. So like I had mentioned earlier in one of my passionate rants about like, you can email these things off, but really what the biggest issue is what happens after the phish. Like you can't train away technical deficiencies in your organization. This gets back to my other thing I was saying about how we're solving technical problems, right? So one of the things I like to do is simulate a phishing event. Now you could email this through if you want, but you don't have to email it through. I like to craft a payload. I like to take real world C2 frameworks. So you could take like Empire.
Cobalt Strike, Empire.
I can't afford Cobalt Strike. If you got
it's expensive. That's like $3,500.
Yeah, it's outside my range, and there's plenty of open source tools. But one of my favorites, I got get a shout out Silent Trinity. That is Marcello. He goes by Bite Bleeder on Twitter.
I haven't seen that one.
We talk. I'll comment on his posts occasionally, but he doesn't know who I am. But Silent Trinity is a phenomenal C2 framework. It's really cool, very innovative. What they're doing, what executing. Like basically interpreting in memory. But anyways, let's just say Empire, because everybody knows Empire. Well, most people I think in this world knows what Empire is. And we got to modify it to get by AV. So hopefully you have some knowledge about what their AV is. Maybe you've been able to test, but let's just say it's Defender. So you make some tweaks to it. You get by Defender. Wrap this payload of a real world C2 framework in some type of delivery mechanism. Like I like HTA documents, right? Because they're still used today.
Everybody uses those today still.
Yeah,
it's a huge payload.
So you have an HTA that drops your stage 0 payload and loads up the rest. And because you've already modified it ahead of time, it will get by the AV, supposedly. Maybe it doesn't, right? And that's a good finding, right? You can put that on your report as a good finding for the client. But we aren't wasting time sending this payload through a nebulous cloud where maybe somebody clicks on, did it fail? I don't know what happened. But at the same time, you're generating TTPs and IOCs on network. And I like to log these times. Sometimes I execute them myself. I sit there and assume breach. And sometimes I do it at the end of the pen test to not set off red flags, right? You don't want to set off a red flag as soon as you start the test, right? But so I want to make sure I simulate somebody just double clicked on an Empire C2 page and it's creating like a beacon out. And I log all these times, exactly what happened, how it bypassed AV, and that's it. And then another thing I like to do is pop like one of my favorite payloads is I can't think of the name right now, but it's basically the one that just asks you for the credentials, like Windows, right?
Yeah.
And we'll just put their username and password. Everybody knows phishing. People aren't expecting a phish, like a pop-up from Windows.
So, yeah. So before we end, because I'm going to end here in a second, the one phishing thing I did for a buddy of mine, we put it together for one of his clients. We already had the CISO signature block. So we put that into a phishing email and said, hey, you need to click this link, passwords were breached, Click here, log in, and change your password. And all I did was use SE Toolkit, cloned their VPN page, and stood that up on Kali. And not only did I have the person whose signature I took click the link and give me her creds, I also had probably about half of the emails we sent, I had all their creds as well within probably 5 minutes of that site going up. And then we just pulled it down. We were like, we're not going to leave this up. So we just pulled it down. But yeah, I like to use it to harvest creds. Like, if I'm not doing OSINT, if I'm just going to go out there and just try to test phishing and see what I can get, I'll get your creds that way. I'll stand up, I'll send an email that says, hey, please log in and change your password. And go ahead, give me all your creds. And then it just loops back through to the actual VPN page, and they think something went wrong, and they just log in again to the real VPN. But yeah, things like that are fun. But no, guys, it's been fun. We're well, a little over an hour now, so I'm gonna have to let you guys get going. It's been a blast, Mike, Dustin, a lot of knowledge from you guys. If you can, I will, if you have, Mike, I know I have your Twitter handle. I got to find it again. It's in my messages. If you don't mind, I'll put your LinkedIn contacts. Dustin, please send me whatever you want. I can throw that stuff in the description because really, you're two guys that people should follow and actually listen to and pay attention to what's going on in the world. So I'll throw that in the description. And other than that, please go ahead, subscribe, hit the bell. Go ahead and visit Patreon. And I do have a lot of merch out there. Dustin, did you get your merch? It said you got delivered today.
It said I'm not at home.
Oh, you're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me.
I'm actually out of the office right
You're
now.
killing me.
My youngest daughter into college. So.
All right. So Dustin ordered stickers and a polo. So I'm waiting on my hoodies and a few other things to get here. Hopefully.
I'm excited about the polo.
Oh, man. I can't wait till my hoodies get here. But yeah, so I got this stuff coming. Guys, please check it out. Everything's down below in the description. Follow Security Happy Hour. I do have it on podcasts as well. It's on Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify, and then because it's on Apple, it's on like 4 other apps also. So go through, check it out. Security Happy Hour. You'll see my